We need to applaud the writers more.
Yeah, we love readers. We need people to read.
Yeah. Speaking of reading, do you like these flags I put in your book to make it look like I read this? I chose different colors too. Really
you read it? You read it, or your producers?
No,
read
I read it. It was great.
Yeah.
This book is great because it's about the history of Asians in America, and there's something for everyone. If you like Asians, you learn a lot about Asian history. And if you don't like Asians, boy, you'll love this book. There's tons of horrible shit happens to Asian people in this book. So man, I didn't know there was so much horrible shit that happened here to Asians.
There's a lot of bad stuff. There's a lot of violence.
Why do we not
bigotry.
know about this?
Yeah, that's actually why I wrote the book. This history goes back more than a century, and it's part of the American story. There's the worst mass lynching in America actually happened in Los Angeles in 1871. 19 men were killed, 18 of them lynched, and they were Chinese. It was not Black Americans. There was this horrific period that I'm sure very few people in the audience have heard of, called the driving out. This period, 1885, 1886, where dozens of communities, nearly 200 communities, the American West, violently, physically expelled the Chinese from their communities. And I didn't know this history before I wrote this book.
This turning out period continues till today. It's till 2025.
The driving out. Yeah. I mean, I thought I was publishing this book into a second Biden administration, and it would be kind of a relatively sedate time for this book to come out, but it came out in a second Trump administration, and I feel the resonance of it every single day.
Right, unfortunately. So I want to get to the kind of lessons in history, but I mean, again, you touch on some highlights of this book, some pretty awful highlights. I mean, it's almost like a who's who of horrible stuff that happened to Chinese people. But again, why do you think we don't know about this stuff?
Well, I think history is written by the powerful, and the powerless are often left out of history. Historians talk about the archives and what is left behind and whose stories are left behind. And the sad thing is, and the tricky thing is, there aren't very many Chinese voices in the archives. You have to really hunt for it. This book starts in the gold rush, and I compare it to sifting for gold. That when you read through the documents from the past, you have to look hard to bring out those voices.
Sure. What is really cool is you tell it through this kind of narrative of people.
Yeah.
So it is actually not all just awful stuff.
No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. I mean,
there's some uplifting.
I think of it as like writers talk about like a 3-act structure, and where there's a protagonist who confronts a conflict, and there's this kind of rising tension and complications, and then there's usually some sort of resolution, and in the sort of feel-good things is when they kind of overcome, and the heart of this book is this violence and bigotry that the Chinese in America experienced in the 19th century, but the Chinese persisted. Obviously, you and I are sitting here and talking, and we're part of that story, and it really is a story of resilience. Sure,
and I mean, you talked about the digging for gold, and that's really what's really cool here is that you did dig for. There's photos of people you managed to find who they lost the history.
Yeah.
But you managed to find their photos and maybe tell a fragment of what happened.
Yeah. No, I mean, a little example of, we mentioned the Chinese massacre in Los Angeles. There were 19 people who were killed, and I think it's so important to say their names, and so we can know who they are and tell their stories. And, we know their names because there were coroner's reports and things like that, but you're trying to build a story. And there was this herbalist, a doctor who named Jean Tong, who was one of the most well-known Chinese figures in Los Angeles, and I tried to build that chapter around his story. And one little detail just shows how we do our work is he was killed, he was lynched, and afterwards a reporter went through his apartment, which had been torn apart, and there was blood everywhere and his possessions everywhere, and there was a pet poodle. He had a pet poodle that him and his wife kept in their house that was under this table with a broken leg and whimpering. And I just thought that detail was so humanizing because that's in the end what we need to be able to do is to move past the level of abstraction and see these people as humans.
Sure. Is there anyone in this book who didn't get lynched?
Yeah, there are a lot of people who didn't get lynched.
What's some contribution to America that you can...
Well, I mean, the name Wong Kim-ark, I hope, is familiar to folks. His name has been in the news. He was born in the United States, and
the Exclusion Act.
He was born in San Francisco, and the Supreme Court, through his case, when he went back to China, and when he tried to come back in, they tried to deny his right to land, and he said, "I'm an American citizen. I was born in the United States." And what they were trying to do at that point is what Trump is trying to do right now, is saying, no, they acknowledged that he was born in the United States, but they were saying that Chinese being born in the United States shouldn't be American citizens. It went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court affirmed the right to birthright citizenship, which is in the 14th Amendment. And the fact that many people, generations of people who have, of descendants of immigrants are American citizens is owed to Wong Kim-ark.
Right. And we don't know that. We don't know that enough.
Sadly.
We should know that.
We should know that. I mean, the other thing about Wong Kim-ark is that I actually didn't know, and maybe the larger story of him is known by some people. His troubles with immigration didn't end after this really famous Supreme Court case. A couple years later, he was arrested at the border, even though this Chinese inspector down there
looked at his phone.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they searched through his phone, exactly, and they hassled him, and eventually they let him go. But his sons, who were American,
they looked for his scrolls.
Right, exactly. They're his sons, who were American citizens through. Who were born in China, but they were American citizens through him. When they tried to enter the United States, they were also hassled, and one of them was actually sent back to China. It's a pretty incredible story that his problems just didn't end there.
So, I mean, from all this and, kind of what we know about history, it seems pretty obvious that, like, when the British came to America and founded America with these ideals of freedom of religion and birthright citizenship, they were like, oh, we meant it for us. We didn't mean you guys. You guys weren't supposed to use this same thing. We just meant it generally. So, like, what does that mean for people now, that we try to live up to these ideals that it's like the people who founded it didn't even intend for that to happen.
And you're totally right. There were no federal laws regulating immigration until the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882. And initially America was open. They wanted people to come, and when this book tells the story of how the country responded when tens of thousands of people who spoke a different language, looked different from the racial hierarchy, the racial hierarchy that existed then. Had a different religion. When they started landing on American shores, what happened? How did we respond? And obviously, it feels really resonant to this moment. It's not just the story of the Chinese American. It's the story of any number of immigrant groups who have been treated as strangers. That's the title of the book. "Strangers in the Land" comes from a Supreme Court decision that upheld one of the Chinese exclusion laws, and the Supreme Court justice referred to the Chinese in a derogatory way as a group of people that couldn't assimilate with the rest of us, and called them strangers in the land. And you could say the same thing is happening. That's what's in Stephen Miller's head when he's,
Why? He seems like a nice guy. Why are you casting aspersions?
He's reading this book and getting some ideas, and
you're changing his mind. I mean, what do you I remember when you got inspired to write this book.
Yeah.
Can you?
Yeah, no, that's the journey. You're talking about this moment that happened on this street in 2016 on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, just across town from here. It was after church on a Sunday, and a group of friends of mine, all Asian Americans, and my family were. We were blocking the sidewalk, and this well-dressed white woman.
Well, now I blame you.
Yeah, we were.
Know you're the bad guys in this.
We were annoying, yeah. And she brushed past us, annoyed that we were in her way, and she said, as she brushed past us, she said, "Go back to China." And I was like kind of stunned, and then I kind of abandoned my daughter, who was 2 daughters. One of them was 2, was in the stroller. She's in the audience here.
Oh, yeah.
And ran.
Yeah.
Ran, sprinted.
Well, hang on. You guys applauding the abandonment? What's going on?
Sprinted after her and confronted this woman, and we were kind of going back and forth.
Yeah.
And she yelled down the street, "Go back to your effing country." I guess I could say, "Go back to your f***ing country."
Yeah, well,
here on the Daily Show.
On the Daily Show,
and I was trying to come up with some smart response, like the adrenaline's flowing, and I yelled, "I was born in this country." It was such a pathetic response, and I ended up writing a piece for the New York Times about how a lot of Asian Americans feel otherized and like strangers in the land, and that was kind of what set me on the journey to writing this book. And that piece went viral.
I retweeted it.
Yeah, it was. I tweeted about it. Bill de Blasio tweeted about it. Yeah. But it was this moment. It was really just an ordinary moment. But it really moved something in me, because I was thinking about my kids and thinking about, I was walking away and I was thinking about, even though they're 2 generations removed from my parents' immigrant experience, would they ever feel like they truly belonged in this country? And that is what stuck with me. And it was a couple years later, during the pandemic, when we had that surge in violence against Asian Americans, the Atlanta spa attacks, where several Korean immigrant women were killed, and I started to look into this history that I didn't know, that I felt like this story, we're part of the story of America, and yet it's not widely known.
Right, and I guess what you're saying is some racial abuse inspired you to write a 500-word response to this.
I came up with, like after you have one of these encounters and you're kicking yourself what to say, I decided to write a 160,000-word book.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I mean...
I hope I'm going to walk around the Upper East Side and look for her and
try to give her this book.
Give it to her.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if racial abuse helps you write this, I mean, if you want inspiration for more material, just read the comments on this video, because you're gonna have a whole series of books after this.
Yes, there might be a go back to Malaysia, or go back to
Malaysia. Yeah. They're forcing me to do homework now. I gotta write it down. Every time someone tells me to go back to Malaysia, but they don't say go back to Malaysia. They're never that specific.
They say go back to China.
Yeah,
probably.
they tell me to go back to China because they think I'm from there. So I don't even know.
Yeah.
I wish they said go back to Malaysia. I could write about.
Yeah,
Malaysia.
and you could say now I'm an American, right?
I guess I'm American. Yeah.
Ronny became an American citizen.
Just real quick. So, like, what do you say to the kind of right-wing Asians who read this book, and they go, you know what? All this abuse that happened to Asians in America, nobody knows about, and we never talk about it, and this is just proof that Asian people need to band together and stop caring about any other race and just push our own agenda.
Yeah.
And affirmative action.
Yeah. No, well, which is what happens.
Which is what happens. So would you say that? I mean, because that's kind of what that's kind of like one end of your possible response to this.
Yeah. No, the reality is I think the impulse behind that is related to my impulse to write this book, that this feeling of invisibility, this feeling that this story needs to be told, and this lack of acknowledgement. But I think folks who are kind of in that MAGA Asian crowd are similarly forgetting history and forgetting the parallels in our story and that of other immigrant groups in this country. They're also forgetting the fact that we benefited from Asian Americans benefited from the civil rights movement and the rights that were fought for and bled for. And really, I think when you read history, when you read a book like this, when you read other great books that have been written about the story of other groups in America, Black Americans, Latino Americans, you feel empathy, you feel kinship, and so that's why people need to read history.
Sure. And I mean, people need to read history. It's just bad. Sometimes I feel like we're never going to live to see the final chapter of the story of Asians in America. You end your book in your final chapter, and you end it to your daughters. Yeah. And you say, maybe. I don't take it away from you.
No. I dedicated to the book to my daughters, and I wrote like, may they find belonging. This kind of, and I write at the end of the book kind of it's a little bittersweet that even though I think it's a book of hope and I said a story of persistence and resilience. The feeling of belonging remains elusive. The question is, how are we going to get there? And obviously the Asian Americans are actually the fastest growing ethnic minority group in the country, and are in a few years are going to become the largest immigrant group in America. So obviously numbers is part of it, but I also think people like you being on TV, that representation is part of it. Telling these stories is part of it.
Be on TV saying is important. It's important people see and hear
I think that's an important part of this. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Michael. Thanks so much for writing this book. Thanks for doing the work. Thanks for sharing these stories that were lost to time. It's very important. And if you didn't do it, I don't know if anyone else would have done it. So thank you so much for doing this. We're all very grateful for you for capturing it. Strangers in the Land is available now. Michael Luo.